And this is the part that really shocked me. I've known red pill content is out there. I've known it's super harmful and toxic, and the algorithm pushes this content to young men. I know the brainwashing of an entire generation of men is by design. And as a former middle school teacher, I mentioned how I observed a rise in aggressive behavior and misogyny in boys. So all that said, I'm actually so frustrated with myself that it's taken me this long to listen to some of it, and it's too easy to find. As parents, if we don't know what the messaging is, like the actual words used, the ideas carefully and casually woven into conversations between alpha males on mics, encouraging misogyny, shame, and hatred, we'll never know how to respond if and when it comes up. So
this is stupid. This is dumb.
Drink the coffee, it'll make you feel better.
Now, I'm not talking about the series, right? I saw the series. The series was decent. And if you ask me how I really came about making this actual video, well, it's because I kept on seeing these specifically white moms, probably liberal white moms, talk about how they're afraid after watching this movie that I watched, and immediately thought to myself, you know what? They didn't do a very good job really detailing what the red pill is about. I think at this point, the red pill has turned into a word like feminist, right? If you go up to a woman, you ask her, are you a feminist? Most chicks would probably say, I believe in rights for women, and they have to clarify that. Why? They have to speak the definition that they associate with the word, because the definition has changed. Same thing with red pill. At one point, I would have probably spoken out and identified real strongly with being red pill because it just simply meant truth. Now, I don't know what you think it means, but chances are, based on the way this woman's talking and how most people usually address what red pill means, it's not something that I would identify by their definition. That's why I don't use it much at all on my channel. You know, I changed this years ago because I saw this coming. But these videos that I keep seeing of these angry soccer moms, bro, are getting ridiculous.
As hard as it is to hear, if you're raising a boy, you need to. From a transcript of a very popular Manosphere podcast.
Let's hear it.
Yeah, women do have it easy. I think being a female would be a disaster. If you're a beautiful female, you get some advantages in life. Of course you do, because beauty is currency. But the idea of actually living life as a female, there's no conquest. You get a guy, you love your guy, maybe. You get some nice meals and buy a handbag, get pregnant, the end. No conquest, no domination. So being a female would suck. This communicates that women have no value other than their looks, almost as though women should be pitied, are fully incapable, serving only the purpose of procreating. Podcaster continues, as a man, you get to build your character, and that's what's so good about being a man. As a woman, you're born either with value or without value. A bit of makeup can change it or not. A whole generation of men have been raised without being prepared for war. Life is a war for resources. It's a war for females. It's a war for attention, a war for domination. And as a man, you have to establish yourself in a hierarchy of men. Conveyed here is a really toxic idea, instilling that men need to live their lives in hyper-competitive mode. That's the only way they're going to succeed, by beating and knocking others down. Being anything less than a leader, a winner, alpha, meaning having empathy, emotions, or a nurturing spirit, means you're what they call a beta or a soy boy, and all kinds of other derogatory terms. Instead of encouraging boys to seek community and lean into their authenticity, boys are told here they should fear or deny having any trait we traditionally assign to women or femininity.
Okay, so to have an honest conversation, there's a bigger problem that is yet being ignored when it comes to this conversation about young men and why they gravitate towards content that she's talking about. I agree. They are toxic spaces that don't foster healthy relationships, that don't encourage men to live a life that brings true meaning and peace and joy into their lives. This is true. But denying that men don't have to compete for resources and women is just simply false. That's not true. And that there's so much more that could be said. When you start making crazy statements like that, and statements like men don't have competition and they don't organize themselves in hierarchies, then you don't really understand. You're not trying to understand what young men are going through, right? Why do they find strength in a man telling them instead of, oh, be softer, right? Get in tune with your feelings. Tell them to go and compete. Tell them to improve themselves. And sometimes it is the man driving the Ferrari or Bugatti, or sometimes it's a man who's achieved what they value, right? Like, for example, I'll talk about myself. Marriage was the goal for me when it came to my relationship. To deny that, it's never been more challenging today for both men and women to marry, men having their own unique issues and expectations and disadvantages, especially when it comes to family court, so on and so forth. It makes sense why a lot of younger men are drawn to men who address these issues. And then there's just the plain disgust that I see that a lot of women and also men have with both individuals who are man and woman who value more traditional dynamics within their relationship. People have a hard time thinking that a woman wants to submit to a man. It hurts. Me just even saying that for some people right now, they just cringe. They don't like the word. They want that banned. A lot of people also approach certain concepts from a spiritual, religious, biblical perspective. Myself, that heavily influences how I carry myself in this life. And so there's that. And if you're using a series on Netflix that lightly touched on these issues without delving deeper into why, and you think you're going to somehow be able to positively impact your young men in ways that they will seek your counsel and guidance, then you're sadly mistaken. You need more than that. You need to be able to understand what it is they're actually struggling with, instead of saying, well, that's not right. That can't be true. Dating can't be like that. Marriage is not like that. You have to drink the coffee, right?
Truly going backwards in time. He finishes with, you have to find a way to fight and compete. You have to do your best with what you've got. That's the game. Either you sit there and jerk blank or cry. The scary thing is I just picked out the problematic parts. They're embedded in with such casualness and normalcy in conversation. Indoctrination at its best. I know that's really hard to hear and it's really hard to face. I'm right there with you. But we have to get a precise understanding of what our kids are going to be exposed to on social media and from peers. This type of rhetoric targets vulnerable boys who are feeling lonely and isolated and unwanted. That's why I say it's being done by design. I want to keep shedding as much information as I can on this topic. We can't protect our boys from something that we don't know the full depth and extent of. In ways we need to adapt to and fully grasp the digital landscape, because we're not going to lose our kids to it. And this
Interesting. What I also think is really funny, man, is listening to her talk, you would think that she thinks, and other people think, that the people who are talking to young men and trying to have those young men embrace their masculinity, improve themselves, and sometimes even discouraging them from marriage and relationships, right? It encompasses a whole lot. I just touched on a few there. They think these are podcasts. While that is true, the reality is these are not just podcasts. These are the men who have dealt with you. What do I mean? This is your ex-husband. This is your ex-boyfriend, right? This is the guy who's been effed over by family court, which is a lot of times unfair to men. This is also why you see more mothers and women speaking like this. And when you hear a man usually address dating issues and issues with marriage and young men in today's society, they take a different perspective. Now, I don't think everything that's come out of male empowerment platforms is good. There's just no way that can be true. But I think that you're missing it here if you're not delving deeper and actually understanding why men are in the position that they're at today. You're not asking the right questions, like, why have you been talking down to men for so long? Why do you think that younger Gen Z males were leaning more conservative? Yes, men can be loving, men can be soft, but sometimes men are aggressive. They're not all soft, and it's okay if they don't want to be. But guys, what I really want to show you here is Here's another video, right? This is what's gonna really blow your mind. This guy right here addresses the same topic, gives advice to young men, and he gets attacked in the comment section because they didn't think that he was prioritizing the female narrative enough. And this right here paints the real problem when it comes to this discussion. Check it out.
My girlfriend and I watched the show Adolescence on Netflix last night because we're just having some food poisoning this weekend, so we just stayed in. And the show is fantastic. I encourage everybody to watch it. Each episode is done in a single shot, so it's like, bar none, probably some of the best acting I've ever seen. Like absolutely amazing, but it's a really tough watch because part of what the show focuses on is on the discouragement that a lot of young men are facing around fears that they're going to be involuntarily celibate for the rest of their lives, that they're going to be incels, and how a lot of these young men in particular are listening to these alpha bros all over the apps that are trying to tell them about, 80-20 rules, that 80% of women are attracted to 20% of men. And we need to address this as a society because I think we're losing a lot of young men to this. And to all the young men that are out there, let me just go ahead and give you a little encouragement. You don't have to be over 6 feet tall. I'm not. You don't have to be super rich. I'm not. You don't have to have a six-pack. I don't, and I never will, because my girlfriend makes really good food and I enjoy eating it and spending time with her. You don't have to be hyper-focused on your career. You need to give a shit about it a little bit. You don't have to be, doing everything right all the time. You probably are going to have more success by being nice and smart and a little funny. And you're probably going to find your way into having a relationship with a really cool woman. But the more you listen to the Andrew Tates or these alpha bros that are out there, the further away you are from actually attracting yourself to a woman that you would actually want to be with.
Okay, so I'll say this as well. Chances are, even this guy would probably think I'm on the extreme end when it comes to my values and more traditional values within my marriage, household, so on and so forth, right? That's okay. But he has a positive message here. Regardless of whether you disagree with what he said about Andrew Tate or where he stands, even if he disagrees with me. Overall, he's trying to do what he can as a man to help. The point isn't necessarily what he said, but more so the reaction from people about him speaking life and positivity into men.
And so stop watching so much corn out there. Stop doing a bunch of these toxic things, and you're probably going to be able to find yourself into a relationship. Now, it takes a little bit of time. I'm almost 40 years old, and I've definitely had my failures in my relationships with some women. But in general, I've been fairly successful. And look at me. I'm a nerd. And if I can find success doing this, you can too. Buck up, just improve yourself, and don't be a jerk, and you're going to find success.
All right, so that's that. Check out these comments. Check these comments out. So, top comment here says, I'm surprised that your takeaway is what boys have to contend with. A girl is deleted, right? Because she's talking about the movie and what happened in the movie, which was horrible. Because of how boys are being indoctrinated, I think you kind of missed the entire point. So check out this conversation. Somebody else, he responded back. He says, how so? She says, because the deletion, she actually uses the word, I can't say the actual word there, of a child that results from the discouragement of young men trumps young men's discomfort over the fact that they might not get laid. And you got to think about this, right? This woman here was so triggered, and most of the chicks are so triggered that she's not looking at this from a solution-oriented place. He's thinking, well, I can reach other men, because yes, you can improve your life. No, you don't need a six-pack to attract a woman and have a good relationship. No, you don't need to have the most expensive car and hella money. No, you don't. You can improve yourself and attract a good woman. Now we understand that it's harder now than it is in the past. This is where people would come in and say, no, it's not. And they would argue with men and deny the reality of what their experience is, but it is possible. I agree with the majority of what he said in his video. And he's thinking, well, I can talk to these young men. I can paint hope, a better picture. And she says, no, you should be talking down to these men. You should be angry at these young men. Right? The young men didn't do what the guy did in that movie. And it's based on a true story, and it's a horrible story, and it should never happen. But look at the reaction to him trying to speak some positivity into men who've allowed hopelessness to take over their lives. Here lies the problem. He says, that's not the point I was making. She responds back, yeah, I got that part. Somebody else here says, if that wasn't the point you were making, then the focal point of your video would have been to discuss that women are actively getting deleted, I can't say the word, by men with this behavior. This is the problem, right? Because this is where men are sort of fed up with this conversation. This is the part where we now start to play who's the biggest victim. And you mentioned some stats about violence towards a group of people or women or this. Then a man comes in and says, well, men go through this and that. And do you know that men have the highest deletion rates, as in deleting themselves? Who has the hardest life is just not a solution to this problem. And also, trying to go to war with the next generation of men is not the solution to this problem. Giving men a sense of a tangible goal, changing the messaging in our advertisements that was always female-centric and focused to also include young men, right? To not paint them as monsters, villains. Introducing God, which I believe is a very important aspect for me personally, will help. And I truly believe without those things being changed at mass, along with the divorce laws. And if you do want to get married, like I always advise, protect yourself. Without that type of change, intentional change for young men, for them to not feel hopeless, for them to not feel like there's a bunch of messaging that's talking down on them for being men. And the hopelessness of young men will take a long time to change. And this will be only the beginning. And that's not the type of world I want to live in. And that's not an environment that I want to bring my children in or raise a family in. But it's the reality. So in conclusion, if you're allowing Netflix to, and especially Adolescence, that show, to properly paint a picture, a real picture with all its nuances of what exactly is happening in male spaces and why young men are attracted to those male spaces, then you're going to be lost. You're not helping, and you're actually making the situation a lot worse. Of course, guys, I'm curious to know what you think. Leave your comments down below. What did you guys think of this? What did you guys think of the show? What did you guys think of the series? Comment down below. I thought it was pretty good acting. Cool stuff. Talk soon. Peace.